we're calling this 5 strategic investigations to strengthen Google and Microsoft. So I'm sure everybody here touches these two platforms at least at some point during the day, at home, in your work. You tell somebody not to do this or not share it that way, or you get a link share that's over here or over there. That is what we do, manage methods. This is our kind of bread and butter where we sit. The basics of our tool is we're a deep level API into both Google and Microsoft. The tool is called Cloud Monitor. So we monitor the content and monitor the activity within both of those platforms. We'll get into all of that today. But again, just thank you guys all for being here. This is our first SAINTCON. We've never done this before. So it's been a nice welcome from the community. It's definitely a good, what I like is it's a ton of information sharing here. Some conferences that we run to just kind of feels like, running through the motions saying, hey, networking and that's that. But we found a lot of great value just kind of talking with you all and just listening to different presentations. So it's been really good. Myself, you either know me by Jack or you may have seen Batman himself. Show of hands, anybody got the Batman mini badge that we got out there? Anybody got that one? Maybe nobody? That's impossible. Okay, we got one. Yeah, David, there's more than one, I promise. We went with the idea that we didn't want to make them mini badges. We wanted to make them mini-ish badges. So it's a little bit bigger. It takes up a little more space on your expander. But again, first time doing this, so we kind of wanted to show what we did. So it's not Batman. We didn't steal any copyrights, promise you that. We made it our own thing. So it's a company logo on there, but it's got our shield. So, maybe we are the guardians of your digital Gotham. Maybe we are the hero you didn't know you needed. And that's kind of the hope that we can run through some of that stuff today, kind of what we do, but also just talking about the basic nuts and bolts of strengthening Google and Microsoft, what you can do with the native tools, what you can do in the admin centers there, to really keep up to date and keep these houses secure. The stat that I always think of now, and it's come out recently, but we all know it's 95% of all hacks are usually an inside job, right? Either somebody's clicking on something, somebody's sending something, somebody gets in a way that can harm your cloud area from there. Things we're going to run to today, I kind of talked about this, but intro, why these things are important. You all know why. We're here at SAINTCON, so we're going to talk about, the certain kind of hacks that we've seen in the last 6 to 8 months that will kind of diagnose what they did, how they got in, information that they grabbed, and kind of use as ransomware. And I think that's always cool to actually see kind of the fallout now of what's been seen. We'll primarily talk about the Clark County hack, Clark County School District, one of the top 5 districts in the size-wise in the country, but they were hacked back in November. But they found somebody in their network back in October of 23. It caused all sorts of havoc. We'll never know the dollars exchanged, but the ransomware was pretty high for sure. So we'll look at that. We'll kind of look at how these issues persist and how these compromised accounts are potentially sitting there. You all get the notifications, I'm sure, at some point, like, hey, your account's possibly compromised. Well, what do you do? What can you look at? What can you do quickly? What can you do beforehand to potentially mitigate these responses? And what can you do afterwards to audit, investigate, look, just with your own tools that you have on hand, instead of calling the insurance agent and then have them running through it all. So, and of course, we'll have time for Q&A. So we're going to show kind of what we do, but we're also going to show kind of the admin centers of both consoles as well. Little bit about managed methods. We like our name, right? It's a good, catchy name. I don't know if none of you all probably heard of it before, but we're a small team based out of Boulder, Colorado, which is the home to the second biggest Google office in the country. Fun fact. So when we started, we came into the kind of commercial space, and it was called a cloud access security broker, a CASB. That's kind of what we thought. Then around 2016, 2017, we started noticing all these Chromebooks being put into schools. And we looked at them and we said, okay, how can we help here? What can we do with our current product to kind of focus it into specific monitoring, specific looking at those tools? So primarily, yes, we do work in schools, universities, technical colleges. That's kind of our primary space. Why? Because there's a lot of data being shared there. They're prime targets. A lot of data can easily get out. So it's a thing we've kind of focused in on that. Does it mean that we can only work in those spaces? No. Everybody's using Google or Microsoft to some point, whether it be email, SharePoint, files being shared back and forth. So there are, mechanisms for our tool to fit there as well. But like I said, we're primarily within the education space. So, a lot of us are former educators, former tech directors. I myself was a former teacher, first and second grade for a couple of years, but kind of find myself over, hey, we're getting more devices in kids' hands. How do we kind of focus on how do we get in there? So there, as a student safety component to this, there's a student data privacy component to all of this that we, heavily tackle. And like I said, we're hosted in GCP all the way through. So we inherit kind of all their security policies. And I said, we're no proxies, no agents. And if you don't have a mini badge, please come get one because it'll give you a little explanation of kind of how we do that, what we do. But it's a, pretty cool team to be working with. So what is our mission? Everybody's got to have a mission, a focus, and this is kind of what our guiding light is, but to make cloud identity and cloud management safer and more secure. So if all of these hacks are happening because of inside jobs, because of somebody clicking something or somebody sending something improperly or file sharing, whatever it may be, or just a simple compromised account, and they get in and you don't have the right structures in place, the right security settings in place, how do you find that stuff out? And a lot of times what we hear from people that we work with is, hey, it takes a long time to set this up. It's confusing. I don't have time to run into this. I got to work on my network issue. I got to work my firewall. I got to work with any other number of things that come into a tech department's space. So it's trying to streamline that. It's trying to say, hey, this is a simple way to do it. We've built some of these policies already. They're out of the box. They're ready to go. And that's just kind of how we center our work. So part of it's when you get a slide like this, you go like, all right, we got to explain what we do. So that's where we sit. Let's go one more slide over there. So I think any presentation, we want to give you like nuts and bolts of what you actually are going to use with your devices in the cloud, but we also want to just have you walk away with something fun you can share with people. I always think at conference, you want to have some sort of like, oh, a little hook, I learned this or I learned that. So I got a couple little like brain teaser riddle things that I want to go through with everybody. I'll give you all a minute to think through this question. After a minute, I'll give you 30 seconds. But if somebody gets it within the first minute, I got the offer of sweet swag, either a hat or one of our big mini badges. So we don't even call this a mini badge, but this is just a badge at this point. I've had tons of people ask about this. Apparently only 2 people got mini badges in here, but I think more people have asked me for the big one. So neither of us. So I'll start the clock and you get 1 minute, all right? The question is, can you name the 5 countries in the world that end with the letter L? Your time starts now. And if you got it, raise your hand. Dude, it back here. All right, cool. That's quick. Yeah. Let's give everybody 20 more seconds and I'll go to you first. Go. The hell? 5 countries that end with the letter L. Gotcha. All right, you're up. You got it. Dang. All right. Nice work, dude. That one doesn't always go so cleanly. You want the hat or the big badge? Cool. Just hit me after. I'll get you there. The what? Yeah. Do not throw it. Yeah. The maker of them says don't throw them, so I'm going to listen to him. Yeah, we're going to go with that. Oh, that's funny. Awesome. So usually I have, we all do a quick scroll at night just to kind of go through this fact came across me. It's like Science Facts Daily or something. And it just kind of like flipped my head. And I'm almost 40 years old and I've never really known this fact or thought through it but I just know for the rest of my life, I'm going to have it. So I wanted to give it to you today just because I was like, hey, we got a big group. I want you to have at least one or two things. You got 5 countries now. What are they again? Portugal. There you go. You got it. I used that on a first date with my wife, and it's worked for life. So it's been good. Just so you know, you got that. This fact, I just think it's cool. Let's see, go to it. Percentages are reversible. 8% of 25 is the same as 25% of 8. Y'all doing the math? Isn't that great? Does anybody else know that? Like, just when you're thinking through it? Yeah. I saw it, I was like, what? And they got us talking about calculus and pre-calc and all sorts of stuff and differential equations. And I was like, well, this is actually something I would take with me. So humbly at your service, there's a fact for you to have. I like that. So I was doing all the math that I was checking every one of them last night, but hey, dumb stuff to get us started. That's what I wanted to do. So the way we kind of identify the problem, this is again, when we got these Chromebooks in people's hands and we said, okay, what are the issues that schools, that a business may run into when they're talking about this? So everything is run usually on the cloud. All your communications, all your, files being shared back and forth. Hey, I got to run this, over to you, or we got behavior reports in schools. We got to ship this off. We got a kid's individual education plan we got to share. All of this communication, all of this life that we have is based on these Google Docs. It's based on a SharePoint file. It's based on something that we're sharing. So suscepting, open to the public if it's not shared properly or used. So if all of that stuff's being there, and like I was kind of talking about, a lot of this stuff can be done natively in Google and Microsoft. You can use their admin center. You can use to kind of go through all of their help articles and kind of whatnot to set these settings up. But we all know the problem. People are underfunded. We don't have enough people. We have too many things to be doing. And that just causes this issue, right? So if all these hacks are happening, what do we do to actually, get into the weeds and into the muck of making this a problem we can deal with it? So, and additionally, when we talk about schools, we're talking about mental health. We're talking about self-harm for students. We're talking about, students working around a filter. We're talking, students, on a Google sites, unblock games, going through that. So there's all sorts of different, things that can come up that are used, within these platforms. And it's something that if we can monitor it, we can look at it, we can take an idea and we can proactively notify the people in charge, whether it be a principal or just the IT director themselves, then that's a help. And that's something we can support. So that's why we build kind of our tool, but that's why really any tech team out there needs some sort of ally usually. Like I said, I was at the CISO talk yesterday, and the talk was like, hey, Utah doesn't even have a set up cybersecurity person in every department in the state, right? And wouldn't that be a help? Yes, of course. You got somebody who can focus on one thing, but it's not there yet, so it's growing. And I think that buzzword of cybersecurity kind of just lives on, but we need to put more stock into it. So it's tools, it's understanding, it's, coming idea sharing like this to get us there. So, we hope that we can be part of that, equation, be an ally in this. But I think coming to a conference like this and just, info sharing is one way to go. So, does that all kind of make sense to you guys? Yeah, cool. Let's move on, Chuck. All right, so why are they important? Chuck, next one. Oh, by the way, everybody, I forgot to introduce. This is it's Charles, and Charles is our senior product specialist. So I work on kind of the outside sales and that team, that part of it. But Charles is kind of in the weeds with our partners a lot. So we're going to run through both of these things. But why are these important? Mainly because of all the breaches and the ransomware happening. To me, one of the stats on this that kind of really sheds light on why this isn't just a one place issue is it's almost 33 for really small school districts, medium-sized school districts, and really big school districts, the Clark counties, the Jeffcos. The hacks happen across the board. And it's not as though you're going to avoid it. It's kind of when, are you prepared? Are you ready? Do you have a plan in place? And this is just a look at kind of the different headlines that have come out in the last couple of years. They kind of just come out. Usually as a parent, you get a email from the school district saying, hey, our data has been taken or been ransomware or something. And usually there's some sort of plan in place to kind of discuss this. But you can see it's across the board. And it's something that I think, obviously being here at SAINTCON, we all know we're thinking about it. We're trying to mitigate, make fix this, but there really is no way to fix it. There's going to be some sort of attack happening at every time, whether you have a device just sitting in a corner that hasn't been used and it's got a login, that's susceptible. Whether it be somebody sending out, all the, behavior reports from a school or what have you. So it just doesn't really end. Like I said, the ransomwares, like everybody's got insurance on this stuff. And most of the time they end up paying out. It's not just like, hey, we've dealt with it, it's covered, but they call the FBI and ended up getting paid out. So that's why cyber insurance is there. But we can prepare ourselves the best we can to deal with it. So, yeah. So, like I said, we want to talk kind of specifics and data around what actually happened at Clark County. So this happened the article came out in October. I think people kind of found out about it like no time, but somebody was in the networks in early October in Clark County. And they kind of just said, hey, somebody's here. They took student devices away for a week. They re-imaged, rescanned, got them wiped clean. But what got out? And this is usually all the information we get. But with this hack, it was by a group called Singularity MD. Singularity MD kind of bragged about what they did. They kind of let people know, hey, this is what we got. Their organizational structure was off. They had some policies out of place that made this really easy. And they did that to kind of leverage some more cash out of the district. And they kept saying, hey, this is going to happen again. If this is a big district, just imagine another district, a smaller size one that will easily be able to get in. The assumption is that a big district like Clark County has all the people in the world looking at this. I think they have over 85,000 students, I think. So probably even more than that. But this was an interesting one because we started to get a little bit of understanding of what they took, how they took it, and then what they plan to do with it later. So they would post some of the data. They would say, hey, we're going to wait 2 weeks. If you don't respond, we're going to post more. So it was almost like one of those kind of spy thriller type dropouts of information, which, for the SAINTCON community, for any cybersecurity community, I think was pretty interesting, as bad as it is to have student data to be poured out there. But Chuck, go to the next slide, I think. So as soon as Singularity did this to Clark County, they jumped over to Jeffco, which is in Colorado. I think it's the biggest school district in Colorado. It was the same thing. They said, hey, you've been hacked. They sent an email out directly to parents. So they bypassed the whole idea that this is ransomware and it's going through, the school district didn't get to release it. But that's what kind of made this even more headline news, right? When the hacking group's just immediately communicating from school accounts to the actual parents themselves. So it freaked people out. People were like up in arms, like, what's going on? This email is obviously concerning. They had tons of calls, tons of information saying, what's going on here? Immediately FBI was called to bring it in to discuss ransom and all of those things. But what Singularity MD started doing was posting what they shared. So let's post. This was just MSISAC, obviously, you all know, but the big kind of Federal Center for Information Sharing on this wrote up a really big summary after this. So we're pulling a lot of that information from here. We're not just pulling this off emails from Singularity, but this is exactly kind of what they did and what they targeted. So Chuck, let's show this up. And Charles is going to kind of run through the specifics of how they got in, the kind of policies that they exploited to get in. But up here, what you're seeing is just a full listing. And this is exactly what they shared out to staff, students, and really just publicly everywhere. And what you can see is they put on all the personal information that is a violation of people's privacy, right? So there's personal emails, there was birthdays, there was test scores, financial reports, behavior reports, suspensions, any number of these things, just one of them, just one bullet point would be enough to be like a serious issue of somebody's privacy being, taken. So you can imagine just how that ransomware discussion probably went. As I said, we got all of this stuff just by getting in via a compromised account. And that's how this all started. So Charles, tell me a little bit more about kind of the specifics, the outline of what they got in and how they got in.
Yeah, it wasn't a very sophisticated attack. They compromised the student's password. And the issue with Clark County and a lot of other school districts is sometimes they use students' birthdays as their passwords, which obviously is a massive no-no, as you can imagine. So this 80,000 student district is using birthdays, and it was month, date, year. Simple as that. And so all 80,000 students had obviously their accounts compromised, because once they figured out how to get one, they started getting all this data and they go, oh, look, we've got now everyone else's passwords as well too. So that's how they got in to start out with, because student accounts are vulnerable. Students aren't great with their passwords, and a lot of times student passwords aren't particularly secure. It's not easy to put things like multi-factor authentication or things like that on student accounts. It's really difficult. So it makes it a lot more challenging. So that's what they did. It wasn't anything too complicated, but once they got one student's account, they just fanned out. And that was the same thing with Jefferson County. In fact, my boss's son and daughter go to Jefferson County, or not his son's in college, but they both went to Jefferson County School District. So their data got compromised. So that hit pretty close to home for us there, seeing that kind of stuff happen. So it was very simple to start off with. And then from there, what happened is their Google groups were configured poorly. So anyone could add anyone else to a Google group. So the hackers did is they realized, oh, I just have to go ahead and add this student to a Google group, and now I suddenly have access to more and more things. So they just slowly spread out as in the Google environment, there were so many things that were just easily accessible. And that's the thing, they just didn't have things configured in such a way that there was really nothing to stop these people from just finding more and more information. You know, these are large school districts. They didn't really think about configuring some of these basic settings in Google that a lot of you probably are quite familiar with. And then from there, they just spread out. And these are the kinds of things that I see all the time in school districts when we jump on calls with them and we walk them through, hey, what's going on? What's a problem? Because a lot of times people are, especially staff members, are not super careful with file sharing and things like that. There's stuff stored in Google that sometimes maybe even shouldn't be stored in Google. So from there, they just kind of expanded out. They took the information and then they said, hey, we're going to go ahead and pull all this data, and then either you pay us or we'll start auctioning the data off to the highest bidder. And again, that's what they did. And the reason they freaked the parents out so much is there's a bunch of student photos on there. They also got into Infinite Campus. So they pulled student photos. So pretty scary for a parent to get a picture of their kid in an email telling you, hey, we stole your data. So, but yeah, it was a pretty simple thing, but it's just, again, the thing where people don't think about these environments. The Google environments, the Microsoft environments have tons and tons of data. And if things are not configured correctly, if you're not paying attention to what's going on, Google, Microsoft, they send all these alerts, say, hey, there's a suspicious login event, there's something going on. And a lot of times people will just dismiss those alerts. Well, if you dismiss those alerts, again, probably in the case of this one, there's probably plenty of evidence that there was lots of weird login events going on. Probably Google and Microsoft, or in this case, Google was probably telling these districts, hey, you got these students are logging in from places that are not normal, and they just ignored it. So, and that's an issue. There's so many things going on, so many things happening. And so then you get into this situation like this one, and then data gets compromised, data gets leaked.
Yeah. I think you said that it was mandatory that they reset passwords every single year. So a student could change their password, teachers as well. But when they reset the passwords every year, it went back to their basic birthday scheme, and that was public on their website. So this wasn't even really like social engineering. It was just like basic, like, oh, there's that. I could do this. I have a list of all their birthdays, and there you go from there. So, you know, the best laid plans, sometimes, obviously, that's an easy way for that many students to get in. It makes sense. But if you can do that and you quickly find that you can add yourself to a policy, and then that gives you a springboard to, and I think they had every single IEP, which is a student's individualized education plan, which is very private to every student. It discusses suspensions, behavior issues, whether they're on, special tracks for, special education or whatnot. So, sensitive stuff, but it was all contained within one Google Drive that every guidance counselor from every school had access to. So as soon as they found that they had access to a teacher account, they added themselves to this list, and then it was boom, it was kind of game over. So that's super simple, really, in the hacking world. It's not complicated. It's just kind of using your head and kind of running through this. And if you get in through that basic password and you have a month to fish around and kind of see what you can do, you can see why this really took place. So yeah, this is happening all the time. I think Charles said that really well, with the, we all get the notifications, but what do we do? So that's all we're going to talk about today, is what we can do beforehand, which is some of these policies that we can set up, configure today, just through all the native tools that are in there. But then what can you do after? So obviously there's going to be, if you're, part of an event like this, there's insurance companies come in, they're starting to, poke around, nose around everything in this, but are there ways you can do this quickly, easily, efficiently with a small team that's not cybersecurity focused? If you're just focused on Google and Microsoft within a school, within a bank, within a library, wherever that may be, just to kind of keep the pulse, right? Like, can you look at login activity? Can you look at, file share settings? Can you look at, hey, is this from a VPN or a weird proxy server that we can at least know that that's something concerning? Let's just reset the password and kind of just be peace of mind today. And do that quickly instead of having to, worry about it. And can you automate any of those policies? There are ways to automate some of that in Google and Microsoft and with our tool as well, just to keep it simple so that you don't have to. And I think I heard this the other day, but it was like, does anybody really sleep that well at night? And I was like, man, I hope people can sleep at least still, but we do. We worry about this stuff, and it's the concern here. So I just think this is super interesting to see them kind of actually list it out, because every time you see the headline, you never really get much more than that. It's kind of a headline and kind of on to the next one. So this was just a great example, unfortunately, for Clark County folks. So, all right. So to summarize kind of that section, kind of what we think pre and post breach, but things within the cloud that a school district, somebody who's just running a domain of Google, and all our emails run through here. What are things that you can consistently keep a look at? Persistent issues that happen day in, day out, that, hey, if it's not top of mind, if it's on the bottom of the list, at least run a check into it, every once in a while. Just, maybe once a week, just keep it on your radar. I would kind of say, hey, let's put this up on, the whiteboard just in the background. So if we got, an hour at the end of the week, this makes sense to us to check a look. So third-party apps, shadow third-party apps. It's super, super, super easy to connect your Google OAuth to any app out there. It's easy to just add the extension. Of course. And teachers are notorious for this. I saw this tool. I was clicking around yesterday. I can't teach without it. All of a sudden, just now. I can't live without it. It's the only thing I can use. And right now, AI tools are kind of the hotbed talk. Hey, this is the new thing. It's a new thing. Teachers are just saying, yeah, for sure. I'm going to check it out. We'll run this. We'll run it through GPT, whatever. But like ChatGPT is only one of, thousands that are coming and they're out there. So shadow apps that get connected, because if they get exploited, or if they have a privacy policy that says, hey, we'll take all your data, and they're connected to your domain, it's an easy avenue. So just a pulse check. Google did make a change last year where they age limited it down. So 18 and below, they said, hey, no, you can't just connect, which did clean up a lot of houses, but there's still stuff that's connected from back before then. It was in October of last year they made that change. The other thing with Google that's kind of interesting is they don't really list who's connected, when they connected. It's just a big, long list. So a lot of departments that we work with say, hey, that's kind of frustrating. It's just time consuming. And if it's time consuming, hey, I'm not going to go into it in great detail. So non-compliant sharing of information. This is kind of what we've been talking about, the nuts and bolts of this, but Google builds the house, right? They give you the framework, they give you the walls. It's super easy to share a file. It's great. Anybody can share it out. It's quick and easy. You just click share and it's gone. But does it have the right file sharing permissions on there? Is it view only? Is it edit view only? Is it view public on the web? And we see this so often, it's like mind-boggling because it's just quick. You just click it, yep, whatever, everybody needs access to it. But something that's super important to a small group, maybe shared externally, and if somebody has that link, they have access to it. So it's something to monitor. It's something to keep an eye on, or at least have some awareness of this information leaving. Can you turn on some of these policies in Google, Microsoft? Yes, you can. Do you get notified by them? Sometimes too many times you get notified. So it's about kind of just building a cadence that makes sense to do that. We see this a ton in schools. Students go home for the summer. They download a ton of movies. They take up a bunch of file storage room, but movies obviously are copyright protected. So we don't want them in there. Neither do you, at a library or something like that. It's federally protected. So compromised accounts. Everybody's got a notification somewhere in their house. Hey, this is a weak password. Something's, fishy. But do you have a process for actually investigating each one of these, or automating it where it resets a password, or suspends that user? So at least you're kind of covered for the time being until you get a chance to investigate. And that's kind of all we're saying. It's like, check this going as it's ongoing. And then post breach, if you were compromised, what did they do? Can you audit what they actually did? Did they send a bunch of files out? Did they connect a bunch of third-party apps? Like, what did they actually do? Or did they send a bunch of phishing emails out? And that's another obviously very common practice is once they get that address book, they're sending out a ton of phishing emails. And for every, know before training, I think the uptake reason is usually, or the success rate of finished is usually like 30 to 40%. So we're not even in the majority of people that understand, hey, don't click on this. And we often get the call from the principal like, oh, I just clicked on it because it said, hey, send me your, updated salary information and, what have you. And they're like, So those are kind of things to take a look at for that. And then VPN usage. Obviously, you can look at this stuff on your firewalls on your network side. But are they app-based? Are they just, can you quickly check in to see, like, is this just a student getting in some weird way? Or are they actually compromised? So there's ways to check that. We'll certainly kind of run through some of that stuff now with you guys. So let's look at, I think we're up to, yeah. So the name of the presentation, we kind of left, the back half here for this, but these are actually like kind of the 5, investigations that we see most effective that you can do right now. And each one that we're going to put up is going to have a link, and we'll share this in Discord so you all have access to it. But it'll have a link to actually updating these studies in Google, updating it in Microsoft, so you can go home when you're back next week and just kind of tool around, peek around these the info on this. But if you were getting a post compromised account, this is kind of what the 5 things that we've seen are most effective for tech leaders to run through. So cool, let's do it. Number 1 is we're going to look at the suspicious login activity. All right. So where did they come from? Was there a pattern? Was there a way you could actually, have proactively set this? So if there was a bunch of accounts or logins within a certain specified amount of time, can you shut them down? If it bounced around, right? If you've seen them in India and in Senegal and Israel and Portugal, just to take those out so you don't forget them, can you deal with that, quickly? So it's watching those patterns. It's not just getting the account notification alert, but it's like, how can I investigate this quickly? So in Google, the way they show it, and the thing with Google, and everybody's aware of these kind of screens, these nested long info docs on how you do this. But, you can check in on a particular user. You can reset a password right from the admin center from here. And you can, obviously put 2-step on, but in students, that's a really tricky kind of spot to kind of deal with some of this. But again, you're kind of watching the log file of that account activity happen in real time. So it's there for you to take a look at. We, I would suggest just running through it so you have kind of a cadence, like we said. The Microsoft side, Charles, anything specific? He's more of a Microsoft guy on this.
And Microsoft does what Microsoft does. It's a little bit more, there's a little bit more stuff going on, a little bit more complicated for sure. But in Microsoft's case, it's this risky users. And again, Microsoft, Google too, sometimes you'll run into issues with licensing levels and things like that. So that's something to keep an eye out for as well. But yeah, if there's users that are having odd login activity, things like that, there's definitely ways to investigate and of course do encourage that. Again, those alerts are really important to pay attention to. That's where we see the issues and things come up. And a lot of times, unfortunately, there's situations where, hey, just something gets let through, something gets in. Google especially has a login type called suspicious successful logins, where they go, hey, the login event was suspicious, but we still let the person in. And those are definitely really important to look at because those are where I see most of the compromised student accounts, sometimes even staff accounts. So definitely login activity is a huge one. And of course, we also do look at login activity as well. This is our own platform here. So let me go ahead and just pull that up here quickly. So we have a tool in here called the Login Analyzer. Very, very creatively named there, but what it does is it pulls through the login data, makes it pretty easy to see what's going on. There's some ways to kind of easily filter this data, just make it quick and simple here. So we have a basic, hey, outside the US is unapproved, inside the US is approved. Again, we can also look for things that are just suspicious. So hey, if we got a bunch of logins from outside the US there, let's investigate, let's see what's going on. Hey, how did they get in? Did they use their password? Did they use something else to get into the account? Is it a VPN? Is it something else? So there's ways we can check that. And then from there, just like Google, like Microsoft, there's ways you can put in automation in place to make sure, hey, these accounts are logging in from places they shouldn't be. Let's take some kind of action. Let's be aware of what's happening here. And again, this is sometimes something that I see in a school environment or in an environment where we see a bunch of the login activity where it looks concerning or there's problems there. So, and sometimes it's students on VPNs, but again, you probably don't want them on VPNs with their district accounts in the first place. So we also do look at this in Microsoft. The interfaces as identical. Same idea here. Hey, is there an issue? Is there a problem out there? Microsoft's a little bit cleaner with how they do logins. It's either a success or a failure, and then sometimes they'll provide some additional details there. Microsoft accounts sometimes end up as targets. There'll be a lot of automated attempts to get in and things like that. So again, we'll keep an eye. The platform can help keep an eye out for that as well. Provide you some quick ways to just look at that data there. So,
yeah, I think the filtering of the suspicious to approved and suspicious to unapproved, like it's always kind of just murky territory. Because Google says, hey, we limit a couple of the apps and a couple of the tools that they have access to, but they're still in the house. So if it's compromised, or you don't think it's compromised, but it may actually be. So you can see with our platform, what we've done is we try to just streamline it so it's quick. You don't have to kind of run through a log file or anything like that. And again, that's based on feedback from tech teams. Tech teams are saying, hey, we don't have a ton of time to do this, but I want to know. So yeah, we can link to a SPUR database. You can just kind of check where this is coming from. Furthermore, from just the login space as well, is you can audit the actual activity once they're in, back to 6 months. So what is their login activity back to 6 months? What is their drive file activity for 6 months? And their email activity. So you really get, when you're thinking post-compromised account, you can find that specific account and then quickly kind of run a report to show, hey, where did they go? What did they do from here? So, and that's what it's all about. You can do the same, things in Google. But again, you're kind of running through your building and investigation and things like that. And conveniently, as all you probably know, but Google is continually putting more and more things behind the paywall. So that great service that was free, and we love Google. We work in Google, we're exclusive in Google, but everybody knows kind of the rub here is that they're starting to try to make a little bit extra cash. Hey, that no power to them on that. That's great. But if you're putting behind, the gradebook function, which teachers rely on pretty heavily, behind a paywall now, well, that changes how districts have to respond and how they have to interact. So, do we have the budget for that? If we have to have grading run through, Google Classroom, our teachers all of a sudden just don't have it, like, what do we do? So it's putting a lot of districts, it's putting just people in a bind if you keep putting things behind a paywall. So, and that's kind of how they do it. It's per user, and they got, different tiers, whether it be the standard or their plus version, to give you those security tools. So just things to keep in mind as you go through. So investigation 2, like I said, was you kind of want to audit that actual files being shared from here. Do they have sensitive information? This would have been super helpful for Clark County, right? Like, could we just run a scan that shows us, do we have behavior reports sitting out there publicly on the web or publicly available? Can we see who's connected to them? Yes, they probably can, but that's a mountain of data. I've talked to some districts and they said, hey, we have over 3 million drive files sitting there that we've never really looked at, touched, understand what's in it, but they're there. And we need a way to really go through and comb this. So, within Google itself, you can investigate these. You can run some patterns. I think you can run a regex through Google. Is that right? Yeah.
You can create your own DLP rules.
So you can create your own DLP that's going to run through the actual, things that you're looking for. Is this time consuming? Yeah. But is it worthwhile? Probably. And again, this is the link right to it. Like I said, this is all about sharing info. So this is just how you do it. You kind of forward it through there, run the different events, and there you are.
Yeah, the DLP is in a separate spot. This is just going through the actual log files themselves. So if you're investigating things on that end, but the DLP stuff is something that Google offers at all levels as well too, and something definitely you should take advantage of if you're not already. There's definitely some great stuff that can be set up that way. And then Microsoft's got their options, of course, via Defender here, how you can really go in and help take care of files, individual files that way as well too. Definitely really handy in those situations where there's a concerning file or something someone's aware of that's popped up there. And then we also, of course, look at files as well too. Go OneDrive files, look at SharePoint Teams, things like that. So there's ways to go in here and investigate. Say, hey, is there problems or issues? Select correctly there. So, hey, are there problems or issues with those files? Hey, is these files contain issues or things like that? Hey, are they being shared in ways that perhaps they shouldn't be? So ways to go ahead and break shares, things of that nature there. So definitely something that is really valuable, especially when we see that stuff where it's being shared, where anyone with the link can get access to it. So coming in, breaking the share quickly, easily getting it handled, getting it done, moving on is great. And then of course, automation. That's where the DLP side of Google, Microsoft are really important as well too. Automating that process. You're not spending time constantly doing that. So
yeah, especially if you find a file, right? Because you typically would have to log out, log back in as that particular user to go find it and change it. So again, that's why we call it managed methods, is there's a way to manage this now. You have an admin capability. You have a live API to go find whatever you want to find. If you find something concerning and you want to deal with it. So yeah, different ways to run it, but again, super helpful ways to do it. I think if you set up some of those custom scans to kind of go out and look for things that are concerning, or may be out there, we have plenty of school districts that will just set that up to run a look for, hey, these are students that are using a filter workaround. They've got some proxy site and they put it up on a Google Drive and they share it out. Typically what they find is they say, hey, we thought it was just like 2 or 3 kids, we're sharing this around, but it ends up being like the entire senior class has access to a drive file that has a filter workaround. So you find it, you get rid of it, or you add yourself as a user to it, which tends to stop students from doing things. It's a super admin control that I think everybody wants to have, and at least doesn't have the time to have. So that's kind of where we are at that. Same thing with emails, right? So take a look through, your email activity. Did that particular compromised account send an email? Who did they send it to? How many people did they send it to? Did they send back? Usually what we find is they send a basic kind of entry point that has like an SMTP. It's all in a heading. There's really no context to the email. They send the email out to themselves so they have access to it later. So you want to find that post-compromised account or kind of where it is, and then just kind of look at what else is coming. Did it seem to be a spike in, a whole bunch of emails being sent at the same time? Did it have sensitive information? Usually if you kind of latch onto a couple of those sensitive pieces of information in email, it's in a few other places too. So it's important to look at phishing emails coming in. Yes, you can stop some of that. There's going to be, fish tank and things like that are scrubbing and looking, and, those engines work pretty well, but spear phishing is always going to be a problem. It's always going to be from a different IP. It's always going to be from a different user. But instead of, waiting for the call from, principal down the road that says, oh yeah, I sent over my salary information last week. Can you pull that email from the domain entirely? Can you get rid of it so that nobody else has to see it? Can you throw it into a trash folder so they just won't look at it? You just want to mitigate that as much as you can. So within Google, what would they kind of show?
You'll be looking at Gmail log events. Obviously great stuff to dive into and take a look at. Again, you gotta know what you're looking for, of course, but lots of fun stuff on that end. So, and then coming back over to Microsoft here, similar idea as well too. So rundowns of how to do that. And of course we can of course do similar things here. If I hop over to Gmail, here is the example. We'll have a component called a live email search, which is able to go out and look for those emails. You set the parameters you want. You're able to locate those emails. You can delete them out of people's inboxes. Take a look at the emails themselves as well too. So can work really effectively to help out in those kinds of scenarios or situations. Again, this is something we use a lot of times when a student account gets compromised, is we go and poke around an email and say, well, what kind of emails have the students been sending? What kind of email has maybe your staff member been sending? Because a lot of times that's where we see right away, yep, there's a compromise right there. There's the student sending out, 100 emails to users in Poland for some reason. They're not communicating with people in Poland, probably, or Germany or something like that. So, if all your emails are suddenly in German from that student, probably not the student, probably a bad actor there. So, again, these things are really important to check in on, because again, when those accounts, the student accounts do get compromised, that's when we see these kinds of things happen and these problems start popping up.
Yeah. Email checks. There we go. We talked about this, obviously, kind of on the list of things, but so I kind of preset the deck for you guys because you knew kind of what was coming on these investigations. But do you have a way to really check into risky apps? Can you look at anything that's been connected, whether it be an extension, a basic OAuth? Do I have to run this manually? Do I just have to constantly go through this? Can I proactively set this so I don't have to constantly worry? Can you make it restricted so they have to request and you auto authorize, that app? Sometimes what we see in Microsoft is it auto provisions an app to everybody, whether it be set up in the service, account, just kind of auto provisioning accounts. And that creates a big hassle, right? Because then you have your entire domain has this app that you don't even know they have it. And it's sitting there kind of ready to go. And as soon as that app gets hacked or is liable to something, your domain is then at risk. So they're, especially with student data privacy laws, they're, going to be able to get in. So that's against kind of any NDPA that's out there right now. So
yeah, definitely on the Google side, locking down your applications even more, checking in on what staff are using is extremely important. There's a lot of third-party email clients out there, especially that staff members love to authorize. There's one in particular, I won't name the name, but they had a data breach about 4 years ago now, where they accidentally released a bad update and it made it so you could toggle between your inbox and anyone else's inbox. So that was pretty great. So those third-party email clients are something you want to be careful with. And again, when staff see things, again, a lot of times they'll just authorize. They'll say, oh yeah, I'm just signing with Google. Great, that's easy, that's simple. So when they do that though, a lot of times they might be granting way more permissions than they even realize. People don't read through that permission screen all the time and they make that mistake constantly. So definitely locking down third-party applications is a good idea. And it's a project usually. There's lots and lots of applications. It takes time to go through those. But the other thing too is you want to make sure you're communicating, because I've worked with some districts where education technology and IT don't communicate clearly. And sometimes things have been authorized that shouldn't have been authorized in the first place, where you do a review of the application, go, yeah, that really shouldn't be on our approved list of applications there. So especially a big problem in Google. And Microsoft as well too, it can be an issue. Sometimes I've seen districts where they make mistakes where they accidentally authorize an application to everybody, as Dak was mentioning. So going in and making those decisions and getting things cleaned up is definitely helpful. And of course, we look at applications as well too. We'll provide some good information on it. So hey, what applications are out there? We also try to categorize applications to some degree as well too. Ways to see what permissions have been granted. A lot of times the permissions can be pretty minor, but more importantly, who's using it. Again, it's probably a big difference if staff members using something versus a student. I've seen, for example, there was a district I was working with where we got on and we noticed OnlyFans, which obviously not an appropriate application in a school environment. And it wasn't a student, actually, it was a board member. So that was a fun conversation to have for that district. So those are the kinds of things, those are the kinds of problems that we see with those OAuth tokens. It's very, very easy for someone to authorize it. And then, hey, they didn't toggle between their personal and their work account. They might authorize something they shouldn't have. So keeping that locked down, keeping an eye on that stuff is really important. It's a huge problem for sure.
Yeah. And they persist, right? So if you don't have a way to shut it down, or you haven't gone through and done this actual kind of investigation just to clean it up, they can just persist and persist and persist. So you're just kind of always leaving a door open. It's like having one, network device sitting there just ready to get taken. So, a stat on apps themselves, like the average 6th grade student in today's schools uses 82 apps per year in their classwork during the year. So I went to school when we didn't have Chromebooks and when we had paper and pens and all that stuff. But 82 apps is a lot for a 6th grader, I think. But that's how many things they're touching just day to day, year in, year out. Hey, teacher, gives you, hey, get Grammarly extended down there so you can, help your grammar. Let's do this. Let's say, here's a game we can test out. I thought this was a cool thing. Now it's a new AI tool. Let's, run this and up in there. So 82 apps per student is a lot. So it's something to keep in mind. Like, this is something you're going to want to go through and check it out. The average school district has over 1,200 apps authorized on their domain just right now. And that's average. So they can be way more. So that's why we think it's a really important investigation to have. And number 5 is just, how do you find time for this? Can you manually, set up some of these investigations to run in the background? Can you have, login events being, resetting a password, suspending an account? So giving you kind of peace of mind, and kind of what do you want to prioritize in those? So we gave you kind of a list of things you can automate in Google. There are some ways to kind of build some of the logic tree there to set these up, whether it be, like I said, login, spoofing emails that come in, you can, set some of this stuff up. So, we encourage you to just kind of run through and check these out, and then kind of figure out what setting is going to work for you. Yeah, Charles, any other that are kind of fun for you that you see a lot? But
obviously, Google and Microsoft have vastly different ways of how they treat login activity. Microsoft, you got your nice conditional access, just prevents the person from logging in. Google, you just restrict services, kind of different approaches to how you do that. I'd probably prefer not to have the person in the account in the first place, but that's just kind of Google's own choice of how they do that. So, but getting that set up in Google, getting that set up in Microsoft is really important. Automating things can be really helpful. It's going to make it so that you're not going to have to spend a bunch of time doing all these things and diving into all these things. And that's something we help with as well too. So we have what we call policies in our environment here. And I'll hop over to Microsoft for just a moment here. So we can look at a lot of the different stuff going on content. So, hey, are people sharing stuff they shouldn't be? Hey, is this thing happening? And then are there ways we can take action on it? Let's break a file, share it. Let's delete an email that's coming in from the outside. On the login side, hey, if there are certain login conditions being met, let's go ahead and notify you as the admin about that and say, hey, this is actually probably a problem, or let's actually suspend that account or reset that user's password automatically. So doing those things can help complement. And we work well with Microsoft and Google's built-in stuff as well. We kind of sit we're an API-based platform. We sit at the end of the pipeline. So if something gets through for some reason, hey, there's another set of eyes that's also going to look at it and say, hey, this managed to get through for some reason. You may want to take a second look at it. Worst case scenario I ever saw was a district that they had a bug ticket in with Microsoft because their conditional access broke. You can imagine how much of a nightmare that was. So thankfully they had a backup with us. So we normally they didn't turn their policies on. They just use it to monitor. So for that period of time, we turned on policies to actually suspend accounts for that period of time because they were just running into so many issues and so many headaches there.
Yeah. And one thing you see in our platform is we have a way to notify the admin of, the domain. You can notify them immediately. You can notify them every 4 hours. Like I said, you want to have understanding this happens. So this is just an easy way to kind of get that log. It's in one spot. It cleanly shows you what to do. There's also a availability with ours to warn a user. So if a user sends something with sensitive information and they use that file share that you don't want them to use, the platform will automatically send them a warning. So I kind of like to think this is like phishing training next, 2.0, because it's saying, hey, now you're actually in the real world, you're using this, but you shared this improperly. Well, hey, now we're going to have a way to warn you and say, hey, don't do this in the future. We have policies in place to do that. So it's ways to kind of build that ability for you to get sleep at night that we think is important. So that's why we wanted to share it. And, we'll kind of open it up. We only got a few minutes left just for questions if everybody has them, but I'll throw this on Discord for everybody as you need. So, yeah.
So it's kind of like it. But we were too split up a little bit more in that. But
yeah. So there's no agent, no proxy. It's essentially, you're just adding kind of the visibility on your end. You're kind of building the tool into your domain. So we don't hold servers. We don't pull any data to our side. We're just essentially giving you the interface, giving you kind of the full permissions and scopes into your domain. So it kind of, and again, you can use kind of the pre-built, DLP rules we have. So all that stuff kind of been built over time, right? We said, hey, these are things people are looking for. So yeah, the turn on time is super quick because you're just kind of adding like an app essentially. But we don't take any of the data. So that is one thing that we'll leave you all with is like, we're happy to help. So we offer everybody just a free audit of your domain, whether it be both Microsoft, Google, or just one. And we'll walk through it with you just the same way there. And we'll look at kind of, hey, is there stuff getting out? Is there weird apps connected? So all that stuff that we talked about, it's on the table. We're here to help. We want to be part of the conversation. So that's that.
Got it.
That's time. Cool. Thanks, everybody.